If you're an entrepreneur stuck between 5k to 10k a month of generated revenue with your personal brand, then please watch this video, because I've helped hundreds of people generate thousands of dollars with just using their personal brand, because I've leveraged how to create content and I've leveraged psychological tactics that you can use in your content to actually convert your audience into buyers. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video, because I don't want to waste no one's time. So welcome back to the second video on this channel, and essentially what we're going to be talking about is how to create content that actually converts the viewers into buyers, right? And so I've laid out this beautiful presentation for you where it's laid out in step-by-step of ideation, packaging, pain points, and systems. And throughout this video, I'll explain what each of the sections are and how you can actually implement it into your own content. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So for ideation, there is a concept called TAM, which is total addressable market, which is the total amount of people that are even willing to hear you out in your content, right? And that's the biggest group. And so you need to choose a topic which caters for the large group of people, right? Caters towards their attention and what they're curious about. Because let's say you're targeting something super niche. No one will even hear you out because they won't even be interested in the topic that you're talking about. But once you broaden out the topic, right? And I'll explain how you can then funnel the broadened people into your own funnel. But you need to choose a topic which everyone can even relate to and everyone has a pain point for it, right? Because you can see that with the YouTube algorithm, it doesn't work like how it used to work. What it does now is it first brings it to a very few group of people, few numbers of people, right? And it tests if they can engage with it or not. And if they do engage with it, if the majority do engage with it, then it goes to a bigger group, and then a bigger group, and then a bigger group. And so in order to get to that like final stage, that final like big group of people, you need to find a topic which they can even, be related to, or they can even have an interest for. And we move on to how you can choose a topic. So an evergreen content or an evergreen idea is an idea or problem that it's recurring over and over and over again, right? For example, let's say you're trying to lose weight, right? Like, it's not bounded by year, right? Basically, in 2026, there's people trying to lose weight. In 2025, there's people trying to lose weight. 2024, there's people trying to lose weight, etc., etc. And so you need to find a problem, especially focus on the pain point of the topic that is always recurring. For example, these are good examples, right? How to save money, how to build a personal brand, or how to get strong in the gym. And these are bad topics. How to bet for the 2026 World Cup, or how to create AI agents for receptionists, because these go out of topic and out of interest really quickly. It might be exploding now, such as the second one, but in a few years, no one will even search for this, because either it's died down or either it's so big that everyone knows about it. And so you can see by these two graphs how to get a six-pack has a really high evergreen percentage. And you can see by the graph that it's just fluctuating, but it's always settled in the middle. There's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, obviously, but usually for most of the time it's just around the middle, right? However, this is a low evergreen percentage, and the topic is new Instagram update. And you can see that it's flat, and then it spikes, and then flat, and then it spikes, and then flat, and then it spikes, right? That's the model of a bad evergreen percentage, because it's not constantly recurring. And I'm saying this to tell you that topics are the most important thing, but they don't even matter unless you do this one thing. And of course, what I'm talking about is visualization. And I'll give a really good example. So if you see this video,
why do some channels just feel so premium? You see, we all have the same feeling. We scroll on our feed. Two groups were given the exact same pill with identical...
You see how Trey uses diagrams to actually convey his messaging. And that's really good visualization technique, is to use diagrams and to use images that actually your audience can understand. And for example, this is a really bad visualization technique. You can see that it's all just diagrams and words and diagrams and words. And for a new beginner, like, it's really, really difficult to understand these type of stuff, because when you're trying to apply to the masses and when you're trying to actually teach someone something, you want to make it as easy for them to actually absorb the message and the information that you're talking about. So what you can do is to use diagrams and use simple words and use metaphors in trying to convey the ideas that you're having. And you see that I'm even conveying this with images like that, images like this, and that just allows you to understand the information that I'm trying to tell you better. And you can see that it's the same throughout. All right, next we move on to the packaging, and arguably packaging is even more important than the ideation, because packaging is how someone sees your information. Because information is commoditized right now and people are tired of hearing the same thing over and over again, because they're all just trying to sell you something, right? Let's be real. When someone creates a content that's information based, they're trying to funnel you through to the thing that they're trying to sell. And there's two types of people who make it really obvious and people who don't. And do not be the one who makes, like, trying to sell someone something so obvious. So there's three main ways to actually overcome this. One, which is explain an old concept in a new way, also called the recycled framework. And this equation should explain it. It's where you apply the same lesson, but with a different problem, different emotion, different examples, and different formats. And what that results in is a new content angle. For example, let's say the concept is founders should stop trying to appeal to everyone. That's quite a good topic, quite a broad topic, and high TAM percentage. And also evergreen percentage as well, because there's going to be new founders every year. But you can see how these different angles just make it more nuanced and make it more unique, right? You're not like saying what everyone else is saying. You're saying it through 8 different ways: mistake, contrarian story, how to angle, psychology angle, etc., etc. But you have to know that this equation determines how someone perceives your content. And the next is CCN fit. So this is very similar to the TAM framework, where the new, casual, and core is kind of like, the total addressable market and the serviceable addressable market, and then the people who actually buy it from you. And so you see how your topic has to accompany for all three right off the bat in order for anyone to just even listen to you. And lastly, I'll be talking about a new funnel that I've discovered. And it took some time, but I feel like this funnel is the highest converting ever. I have full conviction. And I'm going to test this out in the next few weeks through my own content. But I wholeheartedly believe that everyone will start implementing this type of funnel. Because the old funnel is, you see how you create content here, here, and here, right? Top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel. You create content, where this content goes down to middle, which is like nurturing types of content, and then bottom of funnel content, which is trust building content. And that's good all in all, but you see how for each like funnel section, you need to have one whole like piece of content for that section, right? But the new funnel or the new type of reframe that I introduce is the horizontal model, where this is primarily in a long form like type format, where the first, maybe third or half of the video will be related to top of funnel content. So that's addressing the majority of the people, the high TAM market. And the next third will be middle funnel. So that's actually nurturing the people who are already starting to watch your videos. And then bottom funnel is where you're trying to sell and you're converting them into buyers. And you see how I kind of just rotated the funnel, right? So instead of actually creating separate pieces of content for each type of section, you create one content that brings the viewer through the journey and converts it through the video. And you can do this especially well with the 5 stages of awareness, in case you haven't heard it before. This is coined by, in case you haven't heard it before, where a buyer at first will be unaware, right? And essentially what you're trying to do is move them along this pipeline from where they're unaware to problem aware to solution aware to product aware and to most aware. And you can see that it perfectly aligns with this horizontal model, where these type of people, unaware and problem aware people, are the high TAM group, where they're interested or they're curious about what you have to say, but they're not entirely sure what you're trying to sell and why they need to buy. Next is solution aware. So this is middle funnel and product aware. These types of content are where you're trying to nurture the audience that you've captured from the TAM. And most aware is when you're trying to filter out the ICP from that huge group of people. So imagine trying to fish for something, right? And you're trying to catch a specific type of salmon. You reel in a bunch of fish, right, with a fish bag, and then you pick through to see what salmon that you want. And so that's essentially how the long form horizontal model works. And you can see that Iman's implementation works super well, where he splits the video in beginner tips, intermediate tips, and also advanced tips. And he spends most of the video on beginner tips, right? And then 33% on intermediate tips and 10% on advanced tips. And that's how he nurtures and converts his audience into like cult-like buyers. Okay, moving quite rapidly here. So this is pain points and how you can script your content to target the pain point of your audience specifically. So then they're forced to buy from you because they think that you're the best fit for them. As I talked, this is the stages of awareness, right? And so the reason for your content and the reason why your content even exists is to change how your audience feels. It's not to educate them. It's not to give them more information. It's to fundamentally change how they think about a certain type of way. It's reframing their mindset. And you can see this by the 5 human needs. Everyone wants these 5 things, right? Significance, certainty, love, connection, growth, and contribution. However, there's certain needs that are just higher and more elevated than others, such as significance and certainty. Significance is where you feel like you belong somewhere, or like you feel worthy. You feel like you're the man. It's an ego thing. And certainty is where you're certain of success, such as, let's say, that's why so many people go to a 9 to 5, because they're certain they'll get a paycheck the next week. They're certain they're getting a paycheck by the end of the month. That's how the cycle starts. I'm not going to get into what I think about that cycle, but that's essentially why like people are so drawn into a 9 to 5 job, because of the certainty. And you have to think that every person has two main goals, right? They have a want and they have a need. A want is they want to buy a Ferrari, for example. And that's like the very surface level. But then the need is they crave social significance. Like I said, it's to do with their ego. And if you tap in to your audience's ego, that's when real selling happens. And once you can understand how they feel and how they like think, and you know how that ego works, that's when you can finally convert them into real buyers, because you can understand their own problem more than they can themselves. And next, when someone says I want to be rich, they don't actually mean they want to have the most amount of money. They just want to be certain that they can buy food and live like normally the next week. And you see how the difference between the want and the need is the depth, right? And the bigger the depth, the easier it is to sell to someone, right? And so what you want is to actually reframe their want and change it so that they can see what they really, really need. And you want to elevate and maximize that difference of feel to actually sell to them. Because once that clicks for them, once they have that mindset shift, once that shift happens in their brain, they're just like, wow, like this guy knows me so much, or like this guy knows me so well. And they'll basically treat you like a savior, because you kind of opened up a part of their brain that they haven't really used, or something that they haven't really thought about that you've opened their eyes up to. And you can answer these questions to actually understand what they want, which is, what's their dreams, what's their failures, what's their biggest fear, what suspicions do they have about life, and who and what is their biggest enemy. And you can see the greater the depth, the more impact your ICP audience will feel. Because you have to realize people buy from emotion, they don't buy from logic. And you can use this to your advantage, where the effect heuristic explains how you judge something as good or bad based on how it feels, then use that feeling to reason about risk or benefit, right? So think about the last time you bought something. You don't buy like unhealthy food. Let's say unhealthy food, right? You don't buy unhealthy food because you know it's unhealthy, right? You buy unhealthy food because like at that time, at that exact moment where you're trying to buy or when you're about to pay, is when you're craving that food and you're like, oh, I just want some McDonald's, or oh, I just want some Popeyes, right? That's when the mechanism in your brain happens. And so you have to tap into your audience's emotions. You can't just battle them through with logic, because that's never going to work. Because think about the effect heuristic, they buy through their emotions. And essentially what you have to do, this is the best way, and the best way that I've found to actually convert, is think about the map of consciousness, which is developed by David R. Hawkins, sorry. So you have to meet them where they are on the conscious level. So such as when they're feeling fear, when they feel a strong sense of desire to achieve what they want to achieve, or a strong sense of anger, for example, right? The lower the energetic log, which is basically like the score for their map of consciousness, right? The lower it is, the easier it is to bring them up. Because if you can see, if they bring from pride to acceptance, that is a smaller gap than if they are brought from guilt to acceptance. And what you want to do is increase that difference, which is also called the emotional delta. You want to increase that emotional delta. So then that difference will feel to them like their whole life has shifted, because you've kind of planted a seed in their brain and you kind of help them realize something great. So basically, through your content, your main goal is to increase that emotional delta. So what you want to do is meet them where they are at first, because when you're going out to a different country and someone approaches you in Spanish or in English, obviously you trust the English person more because they're on the same wavelength as you, they understand you. So you have to really understand your audience. And once you are at their level, you bring them up mentally and emotionally up to your own level, right? You tell them the truths, you tell them the difficulties, you tell them your journey, and it's almost like you're laying a path for them, right? And so that really increases their emotional delta, because they realize that they realize that you've been in the same position as them, yet you've achieved so much greater things than them. And so like there is definitely a way, because if you were me back then, right? Like if you were in the same position as me, and you are in the same, and then you are in the position you are right now, which is a much higher position, then there must be a way for me to achieve that same thing. That's what the audience is thinking. And they're kind of feeling like a big emotional high, and that's crucial. That's exactly what you want. And then after you do that, you want to then bring them back down. You want to kind of show them that there's a path, and then immediately bring them back down to their own pain points and to their own level. So they realize like the difference, and they realize like, first, there is a way, it inspires them, and second, they are definitely far from that, or they're like, they could achieve it, but they're not there yet. And that's the important thing. You want to make them think that they're not there yet, but it's achievable for them. And once this difference is maximized, they will buy into anything you sell into them, because you've laid out the path for them, you've laid out the fundamentals, and they believe that. Because you can think, everyone wants to meet their need, right? Your personal brand isn't there to sell straight up on the offer. It is to make them realize that, oh hell, like this can actually fix my deficiency, or this can actually get to where I want. And that's essentially what your content should be focused on. It's not the information. That's what most creators are getting wrong, and that's what most entrepreneurs are trying to focus their attention on. You can't just rely on information, you have to rely on the reframe of their mindset. And that's how you get people to buy into your brand. Lastly, I'll be talking about the systems that I use to actually help me ideate and help me find winning formats and winning ideas, and also how I range them, because I have like thousands of ideas every single day, right? And I'm not going to be able to remember them, and neither are you, right? So you need to find a way to actually organize it and systemize it, so once planning happens and once filming happens, editing happens, you are structured in a way that it's super easy to get organized. And so essentially, I'll link this below, but this is the topic finder that Sam Godet uses. And he is like the genius. He's basically the creative director for Dan Martell. And he scaled him from like less than 20,000 followers to, I think, 6 mil, like 5 mil in like 2 years or 3 years, which is absolutely diabolically crazy. But essentially, I'll link this below. This is the ChatGPT viral topic finder, where you just input your niche and it will spit out 20 winning ideas and high pain point ideas that have come up recently. And so what it also gives you is a hook and some ideas on how to structure your content. I'll give you an example real quick. Okay, so let's say gym let's say this is my niche, right? I help men lose weight in the gym. And you see how it goes through, it scours the internet for the winning ideas, scrapes them. And it just gives you ideas that apply for a high TAM market. And this is also CCN based as well. So there's really not any excuse to not create any content, because you have the ideas, you have the hooks, and you have the formats, and you have the talking points, right? Obviously don't copy it word for word. You want to actually put your own spin on it and, you know, put your own like sweat and tears into creating and scripting the content, because this is very ChatGPT like, right? But it gives a really good idea on where to start. It gives you a starting point, which is pretty impressive. And next is my own custom content pipeline organization, where I have the ideas, I have the scripting, done scripting to edit and editing, right? And I'll show you here. Essentially, I have my ideas, right, which, like, every single time I have an idea, I just put it on here. And then I'll take some time to script. Let's say I'm trying to script this, you know, idea. Version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, right? Or I use my teaching or breakdown format. And I basically construct a hook, blah, 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 find the main topic, and then find 3 subtopics. And then I also add a CTA. That's essentially like all I do for ideation and creating content. And then you can see by the calendar all the things that you've posted and all the post types, so you get an idea on the ratios of, you know, what types of content you're posting in different formats. And then these are all my posted videos. Obviously I've posted way more because I've just, sometimes for my raw videos I don't actually put it onto this pipeline. But you just get an idea on how like to create content, or like the systems that I use to create content, which is pretty impressive. So yeah, that's all for today. But if you're interested, then DM me the word authentication, so I know you came from YouTube, if you want to work with me. But I hope this helped, and all the best to you.